folks, welcome back to Punk and Paisley. I'm your host, Chris. This is a channel in which we're going to examine pretty much any variety of fuzzy or distorted guitar music sometime between 1965 and 1990. Its various offshoots, recommendations, implications, arguments, lists, you name it. And today I have a wonderful recommendation for those of you who like your punk rock and the offshoots of punk rock. I've mentioned before on the channel that there is a tendency to view the 80s hardcore, 80s punk as something that happened between the late 1970s and then about 1983. We trail off. Nothing happened. There's a grand hole in the narrative, and then grunge happens around 89, 90, early 90s, and we pick things back up from there. What happened in between was a lot of wonderful, vital music and a lot of the culture and the spirit, the infrastructure, really, with labels and distribution and zines that kept alternative music alive. A lot of the story is really in the mid to late 80s of the people who were soldiering on in obscurity and made, in many cases, more complex, more interesting, and really vital music that is underrepresented. I'd like to represent a lot of that on this channel. And this compilation, Open Mind Surgery, on Blurg Records, Blurg right here, the wonderful UK anarcho-punk label, political punk label. This is one of the finest records that you can buy from the mid-1980s if you're interested in punk and its offshoots. Blurg Records is the product of Dick Lucas, who was the mainspring behind Subhumans UK. He was also the co-founder of Culture Shock and Citizen Fish, bands that have gone on, bands that continue to this day. I saw Culture Shock on tour just a few years ago in North America, so still very much around, and Citizen Fish around for decades with many albums. But yeah, Dick Lucas even was in a punk band in the late 70s, I believe, briefly, or around 1980. But really one of the important figures of UK anarcho-political punk, and in a lot of ways everything that the labels like Crass and Motorhate were not, in terms of being approachable, friendly, human-scaled, and interested in the music side of things as much or more than the visual arts and the message, the lyrics, the lifestyle. Blurg always brought something extra to the table from the musical side. Whether that be Subhumans UK themselves, who went from a straight-ahead thrash band to what we might even describe as a sort of punk prog by the time you get to the Worlds Apart album, to Culture Shock and Citizen Fish, which incorporated ska, especially in very interesting ways, not just your second wave or third wave straight-ahead copies of ska, but something that was actually incorporated into rock music with very interesting and complex guitar work, which blended this into something new, something I thought that was very exciting. But you get this package in Open Mind Surgery, which later becomes a lyric that Dick Lucas uses. Wonderful package of very interesting bands. Now this is 1985. The visual reproduction here is pretty blunt. It's a single color printing. I like the green. I like the fact that we're not just doing black and white. That was something that was a little very human scale with Blurg, that you would get releases that not only were musically interesting, but the graphic side of things was giving you, I think, a cut above what you were usually getting from your black and white stenciled anarcho labels copying each other in the 80s. And musically, this is a wonderful collection. You have Culture Shock themselves, prior to or contemporaneous with their debut 12-inch EP, Go Wild, which I would also highly recommend. You have two tracks from them, No Chance in a Million and what's the other one on here? Punks on Postcards. Both wonderful songs which meet somewhere in the middle of a punk rock song and a ska song. Not your third wave predictable ska punk, which I'm not really wild about in general. Something really, a blend that's really new and different and interesting with always insightful lyrics. And then you've got Smart Pills, Freak Electric, and K4 are three bands on here, 2 songs each. Everybody gets 2 songs each. Those 3 bands, Smart Pills, Freak Electric, K4, very interesting. They're mixing the 80s sort of hardcore approach, certainly a very low budget production values, 4 and 8 track recordings we're talking about here, mixed with their goth influences, their post-punk influences, and just really interesting songwriting, more of a impressionist lyric approach with all 3 of those bands. And very interestingly, one of these 3 bands, 2 of them are British, one of them, K4, were from New Zealand. And for years, because I like these 2 tracks, it's the 40th anniversary of this album, by the way. I'm not doing this review because it's the 40th anniversary. That's happenstantial, but worth noting that this is a 40-year-old album, which you've probably never heard about, and which is supremely interesting. K4, no other tracks on vinyl, a New Zealand band. This speaks to the power of tape trading and the mail-based. This is before the World Wide Web. The mail-based stamps on an envelope, sending somebody physical cassettes of your music culture, which was so big in punk and the other alternative musics at the time. Tape trading, huge tape trading, and selling a cassette for $2 or $3 of cash in an envelope. Believe it or not, for some of you younger people, a shocking concept, was the norm. That was the norm. That was the only way that a lot of bands were ever getting their music out. And then you would hope that some somewhat better established label like Blurg would perhaps put you on a compilation, so you could be proud of getting something on vinyl, because the costs were more prohibitive at the time. A band might be around for a few years and get out 1 7-inch or a split 7-inch, where they have half of a 45 record. They have 2 or 3 songs on there, and another band who are friends of theirs or that they toured with split the cost, and they get a few songs out, so somebody could hear what you sounded like and maybe book you on a tour or get you on another compilation, or God knows, even sign you to get your own album out, if such a thing were possible. K4 is a band that got nothing else out. They had a demo tape out of New Zealand before the World Wide Web. So pretty amazing that anybody could hear this at all. What's more amazing, I'm going to put a link in the description if I can locate it. One of my favorite music blogs that is more focused on the 60s than this era was doing a sort of comprehensive dump of, just within the last 2 years, was doing a comprehensive dump of Kiwi groups and rare music that they had from New Zealand. And they actually put a rip of the K4 demo tape on the internet, which was amazing, because I had been looking for anything from this band for 40 years, and just 38 years at that point, and just found it a couple of years ago by happenstance, because somebody in New Zealand was digitizing their rare music collection. But otherwise, you weren't going to hear these things. I'll point out that my wife, who likes a lot of 80s alternative, gothy sounding stuff, she likes her Bauhaus, Peter Murphy, Susie, and very open-minded with a lot of music, but doesn't always like a lot of the harsher hardcore stuff that I play. Sometimes she does. Really liked those 6 tracks by those 3 bands, Smart Pills, K4, and Freak Electric. So keep that in mind if that helps you with any decision here. Instigators, aka Instigators UK, have 2 tracks on there They were an interesting band who were blending sort of more mainstream rock with punk, with a hardcore sound, political lyrics, catchy tunes, 2 songs on here, well worth it. Steve L., some anarchist guy with an acoustic guitar doing, I won't say Billy Bragg, because Billy Bragg usually would, in this period, was playing chords on an electric guitar and sort of doing a Dylan for the 80s type thing. But Steve L. is doing a more straightforward, kind of busy acoustic guitar folk. That 2 tracks I don't mind at all. Nice change of pace. Gave you a bigger snapshot. Dick Lucas always interested in, can I incorporate if there are folk musicians, if there are reggae musicians, if there are other musicians playing the anarcho-punk circuit, if there are the festival circuit, if there are spoken word people. Sometimes the Blur compilations on cassette would include spoken word. Not my favorite thing. There was kind of a craze and a scare for that in the 80s and 90s, but nice for the diversity. So you get 2 Steve L. tracks, not bad at all. And then, Depraved, who I already mentioned them, I believe, on the Viva Un Conto recommendation / review in another video. They're on here, very, very socially active, and kind of more straightforward hardcore. I would say virtually almost even American style with a British voice. Hardcore, 2 tracks on here. The most straight ahead, the most straightforward, typical mid-80s punk stuff on the record. Civilized Society with a question mark, so I guess you have to up-talk that one. 2 tracks on here. They were a metallic leaning, which was very common in the mid to late 80s, sort of metal tinged hardcore act that I believe had 2 guitars, 2 vocalists, certainly, male and female, and interesting lyrics, 2 good tracks, 2 solid tracks, kind of metal tinged hardcore, and from the British anarcho side of things. So pretty good stuff. And then 2 tracks by Scream, the American band from Northern Virginia, who were related to the DC scene. In fact, Ian MacKaye engineered one of the 2 tracks on here in 1985. This is pre-Fugazi. Their first song, a lot of Scream stuff at this point, and I mentioned this again, they were another band that were on Viva Un Conto. I would almost describe them as Van Halen meets hardcore, if you could imagine that. They're this upbeat, almost party hardcore, not in a skate punk sense, but more about the rhythm, more about an almost rock beat. And there's even a lot of guitar noodling on here, which some of you that are strict punk rockers might not like so much, but if you're a bit more open-minded to that. And then their other track, Walking Song, the one engineered by MacKaye, is straight up dub influenced. Definitely dub reggae influenced, still a rock track. Interesting music, good stuff. You get the booklet. You get the booklet with the contact information for all the bands. You get the lyrics. You get the art. You see what these bands are all about. Some of the printing on here, because it's shrunken photocopying. Actually, this looks offset print. This looks like they actually sprung for offset printing as opposed to just photocopying, which again, pure class from Blur. And right here, you see the Culture Shock lyrics and art from Dick Lucas. His lettering. He has a distinct font that is all hand done. And that is the look of Blur Records. That is their aesthetic. So you get that from his printing. You get that from his artwork. He's chief cook and bottle washer of Blur Records, and I'm going to put the link to them in the description as well. It's almost 50 years that Blur's been around. It's almost 50 years since Dick Lucas has been active in these circles, and totally deserves your support. You can get a VG Plus used copy of this record right now on Discogs, last I looked, for less than $20 plus postage. And to me, this is so much better, so much more fulfilling, so much worthwhile as an entire package than a lot of the crud that's kind of out there. I would take this over overpriced New York hardcore jock stuff any day of the week. I would take this over mass-produced your Green Day-ish Hot Topic. Look, Mom, I have spiky hair. I'm edgy. Third generation pop punk. I would take it any day of the week. I would take. This is the real deal. This is what punk rock was in the mid '80s. You want to hear what things were? You want to hear some diversity? Yeah, a lot of it's recorded on 8-track. 4-track recordings. It's a little rough. Does mommy's little baby need their Green Day in the studio with the 24 track and the, maybe some panning? Maybe you need some panning. Does little baby Bunting need some Dark Side of the Moon action in their punk rock at the Hot Topic? No, you don't need that. You need the real deal. And this is the real deal. This is the way it actually sounded. Open Mind Surgery. Full recommendation. If you see this video and you're interested in this kind of music and you have the money and you don't buy this, I can't help you anymore. I can't help you. I'm shoving you in the right direction. I am correcting your aesthetic sense, and I'm doing the punk god's own work here. So I don't know what else to do for you. This is Chris again with Punk and Paisley. If you think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to have a lot more recommendations and counter recommendations for you in the future. And remember, folks, keep on rocking in the unfree world.